welcome to Smart from the Start. I'm Darryl Murdoch, your host for this program, and this episode focuses on the topic, what did your child learn at school today? Quite often parents would get the idea that their child learned very little at all, but I think you'll be surprised at what they actually do learn. Today we have our panel with us, our panel of experts. Welcome panel. I'd like to introduce them. First of all, Natalie, tell us a little bit about your background in the field of education.
Thanks, Darryl. It's great to be here. I'm a primary teacher in Melbourne at Nunawading Christian College.
Excellent. And how many years have you been at Nunawading?
This is my 7th year now.
So you've got plenty of experience on what the hidden curriculum's all about.
Well, if you count 7 as a lot, indeed.
Mark, welcome to the program.
It's good to be here, Darryl.
So a little bit about your background, Mark.
Yes, Darryl, I am a geography and economics teacher and have taught for around 23, 24 years and have been a college principal for the last 13 years.
Indeed. So you bring a lot of experience to the table. Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
Just give us a little bit of background, Peter, and your experience in education.
Yeah, thanks, Darryl. Well, I am a maths teacher by trade and have done so for many years. Then I was a school principal and now I'm a school administrator over 11 schools in Sydney and New South Wales.
Thanks, Peter. Leanne.
I'll continue the theme. I've been teaching for 15 years and have taught in New Zealand, the UK and now in Australia, and few different roles, currently as the head of primary in a school in Western Melbourne.
Thanks, Leanne. You know, quite often children hop into the car after school and their mum or their dad will ask them, what did you learn at school today? And quite often the response is, nothing, didn't learn anything today. And of course, we all know that that is not true. Children do learn a great deal. In fact, schools are about many things apart from academics. And in particular, they're about socialisation. And we want to explore what is beyond the formal curriculum. In school terms, we often call this the hidden curriculum. We want to look at some of the things that are occurring there that sometimes go unsaid or unseen. The hidden curriculum. Let's see if we can explore what this term is all about. Peter, how would you define it?
Yes, well, I think the topic you brought up already about the child getting into the car and saying, well, I didn't learn anything today. What they're really talking about is facts. They may not have learnt the names of the islands of Japan or the capitals of the states of Australia, but there will have been a lot of unplanned things that they will have learnt along the way. Things that the teacher may not even have realised those students were going to learn. And this will come about by the language that's been used, the interactions that they've had, and all sorts of things other than what is directly related in the written down curriculum that the teacher has in front of them.
Thanks, Peter. That was a great explanation of what the hidden curriculum is all about, and explaining that schooling is much more than just sitting there learning in the classroom context. You know, life is full of either crystallising experiences or paralysing experiences. And I know that I can look back on my life and know that there are people who had a crystallising experience and there were others who had some very paralysing experiences. And I think as human beings we try to remember the crystallising experiences. And there were teachers that I can look back on who said some very kind things which really set my career in motion. And rather than talk about my experience, then perhaps it's best to talk about you as panellists in terms of teachers and the impact that they've had on your lives at various times. I know, Natalie, you had an experience.
Yes, there was one particular teacher who taught me for Bible, economics and sports and industrial technology, you know, all those subjects, and he was a real role model in what values in real life are and really had an impact on I know for me, but other students as well, because he challenged us to do the best that we can, to persevere, to have that determination to strive for the best, and that we were all there for a purpose here in life. And that was really, really important to us at that time in life, you know, making decisions for our future. And it was really great to see values modelled by an adult that really cared for us, and that's had an impact.
Excellent. And here it is, the hidden curriculum. It's not what he taught you in the classroom, it's what he modelled.
Yes.
Mark?
It's interesting that you use the words paralysing and crystallising experiences. I had a rather serious accident when I was young that involved spinal injuries, and I carry the legacy of that even to this day. So it was a paralysing experience, but at the same time it was crystallising for me, because I had a teacher that took the time out to spend time with me at a very traumatic period of my life, and spend time, I suppose, sharing with me the fact that my life was important to God and that God had a plan for my life. And so that I look back on as a fairly pivotal point where I was inspired by an inspiring teacher.
I'm sure you've all got examples. Peter?
Yeah, well, I guess as a mathematics teacher, we have a little fraternity of maths teachers. And I had a mathematics teacher at high school who said to me, "You've struggled with this subject and you've conquered, so you now would know how to understand students in high school and how to help them do the same thing." And that helped me actually want to do the career that I chose. And then just a little while ago, I heard from a teacher at another school who used to be a student of mine in school, who became a maths teacher himself. And one of the other teachers in the school rang me up one day and said, "Guess what? This person in their staff meeting in the morning said that I was one of the inspiring people to him." And so it goes on from generation to generation of teachers.
The passing of the torch.
It is.
That's
and
right.
It's one of the inspiring things about being a teacher. Leanne, have you had an experience where a teacher has touched your life in some way?
I think for me, I can't give a specific example other than, for me, teachers who were compassionate but passionate. So I remember distinctly a teacher in the art room just being outrageous, but it was enough for me to be engaged in the learning. So yeah, thank you to my art teacher.
We're going to a break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about how are values transmitted through this vehicle of the hidden curriculum. Come back and join us after the break. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. In this episode, we're talking about the question, what did your child learn at school today? In other words, we're exploring behind the formal curriculum to the hidden curriculum. And what we want to explore now as a panel is the whole idea of how to transmit values into the lives of young people in the school setting. It's so essential that this occur, and this is part of the hidden curriculum. Leanne, from your perspective as a primary educator, what do you see as the best ways to transmit values?
I definitely think it's about what the teacher does. So what do they might say one thing, but what do they do? But on a whole school perspective, I think it's about being intentional. So what are the values you're focusing on, developing a common understanding across the school, giving the students opportunities to practice that and create that terminology not just amongst those within the school buildings but also with families. And some of those things, when I certainly grew up, weren't intentional, but now they actually learn terms and learn what they mean and practice them. And I think that's fantastic.
It's actually quite amazing in my mind that we're now talking about teaching values. I believe as Christian educators we've always been doing that, but it seems to be the catch cry. Mark, what do you make of all of this?
Yes, I've noticed that over the last 30 or 40 years there's been a significant change. I think back to maybe 30 or 40 years ago when people were saying we provide education and it's valueless. We won't mess it up. We're just here to provide students with education. And I think our society has seen the effects of that, where they've looked at valueless education and then come with the conclusion, well, this is what it's brought us. And our society has disintegrated, and there's been a lot of negative results of that. And now we've seen a bit of a turnaround around in the secular education systems where they're saying maybe we didn't get it quite right the first time round. Maybe what we need to do is have values in our education. I don't think they're quite ready to yet introduce God into the picture, but I believe that there's been a significant step in the right direction.
Interesting comments. I was doing my bachelor's degrees more years ago than I would like to remember. And there was a sociology lecturer who said something quite profound in a lecture room with something like 500 students. And he made this comment. And he said, in an effort to be all things to all people, state schools have become nothing to nobody. Now, this was a group of secular educators there doing their bachelor's degrees. And I thought for a sociology lecturer to say that was something quite profound, because he wasn't coming from a Christian perspective. This was a secular university. And I think we sometimes need to realise as Christian educators, we do have something special to offer. Peter, your perspective on how to transmit values, this hidden curriculum agenda that we're talking about.
Sure. Well, look, I do agree very much with what Leanne was saying before, in that we really need to model them as teachers. But at the same time, we need to have a plan and we need to be intentional in the way it's done. And a lot of the schools in our region now are actually taking one value per week. And they may write that value up on the board. The person who comes and speaks for chapel would speak on that topic. They would talk it through, pull it apart with the children during the week. I think that's a good thing to do. I think we can pick out values that Jesus showed in his life on earth and use that particular Bible story for that week when that value is on display. I think we can bring in community people who are known for, let's say the value is compassion. Bring in someone from the community that's known for their work in the area of compassion and let them talk to the students. Or maybe even go back into history and pull out a character in history that was known for that same value. I think there are many intentional ways of bringing values to the children.
No, it's interesting at times. When I was a principal, you would have parents come and they would say, look, we really just want our child to have a values-based education, and that's why we're choosing this school. We want you to provide the values. We're quite happy to sit back, but you do the work. And I had to remind these people that it was actually a team effort. It really wasn't a one-sided affair. There's only so much that a school can do. And I'd like to introduce the concept of the fact that it actually probably does take a community. I know a book that I read by Gary Hopkins called It Takes a Church, or in another context, it takes a community to connect with young people and to teach them values. What do you think about this concept of taking a community, that it's much more than a school? Natalie, have you got a thought on that?
Yes, well, I would totally agree with that. I mean, we know that if families' values are in line with the school's values, that is going to work to benefit the child. Now, if the community also aligns, imagine how much more it will benefit the child.
It's often called cognitive dissonance, where if there is disagreement between different authorities, children get very, very confused. Where there's agreement, a great deal of good can be done. So looking out more broadly into the community, Peter, you mentioned the concept of involving community figures. I think that's a very important aspect to pursue. There's also other ways in which the community can be engaged. I know a study was done in the United States not that long ago in a at-risk town in a country region of the United States. And in this particular circumstance, they had a high drug abuse problem, they had a huge teenage pregnancy problem, and unfortunately, all the education programs that they invested in with hundreds of thousands of dollars did not change statistically drug abuse, teen pregnancy. They adopted a new program. They said, let's try adopting young people, calling them by their names, looking out for them down the street. And you know, the teen pregnancy and the drug abuse problems dissipated rapidly under those circumstances. And I know that there's an example in New Zealand, Mark, that you're aware of as well.
Yeah, so I was doing some studies recently and I came across some work that had been done in New Zealand, and they had analysed a whole series of towns, and as they came back with all the data they noticed that one particular town had a far, far lower rate of at-risk behaviour by the young people. And when they began to look and analyse as to what brought it about, it was one significant individual that sat there by the local park and included all the young people in his football team.
It takes a community. There's one aspect we haven't covered, peers. I wonder what the impact of peers is in transmitting the broader hidden agenda. Come back after the break and we'll talk about the huge impact of peers. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. In this episode we've been talking about what did your child learn at school today, and in particular we've been focusing on the hidden curriculum, and I think it's been quite revealing to explore what it is that impacts in terms of value formation in the lives of young people. We're going to go to the panel now and talk more about another impact upon the lives of young people, particularly when they get into the teen years. It is the peer group that really starts to impact on the lives of young people. In fact, research would indicate that maybe 70% of the influence during those teen years is the peer group. And that is something that we can't cast aside lightly in terms of the type of education we choose and where we choose to have our child educated. Panel, peer group influence. I'm sure you've all seen it at work. How does it operate within a school setting? Mark?
I know that oftentimes a young person, and I speak here both as a teacher and also as a parent, what my friends will think about me is more important than anything else. Whether or not I'm doing something good or whether or not the choice is perhaps not so good, what will my friends think? And that factor is sometimes the motivating force behind a lot of choices, whether they be good or perhaps poor choices.
So the peer group is very, very important. Leanne, from a primary perspective.
Yeah, I think peer influence is huge actually. Sometimes in a primary setting we can use that to turn things around, so use it in a positive way. You know, it might be the child's making wrong choices but the group actually models and gets alongside and supports, and it can be really used to promote a positive choice. And yeah, it works even when they're 5.
Yes, indeed. And in this day with the media and the impact of the media too, that mass influence is larger than it's ever been. One of the things, Natalie, that you mentioned was very important in the lives of young people is networking outside of school hours as well.
Yes, things like Pathfinders. I was involved in Pathfinders growing up and it had a huge impact on me. The adults that are leaders there, they're role models and mentors, and you've got your peers there that not only I went to school with but went into the great outdoors, you know, camping and hiking and those sorts of things, and it was a really encouraging environment. And I think it's really important for kids to get involved in community activities as well as seeing their peers in school.
So Pathfinders, just explain that a little bit further.
Pathfinders is like Scouts. They go camping and learn how to tie knots.
Yeah, excellent. Mark, as a parent and as a school principal, what are some of the things you'd say to parents in terms of markers to be aware of in terms of young people choosing peers?
Sure. I guess the first question I'd ask a parent is, do you know the name of your child's best friend? And if I got a yes on that one, I'd then ask, well, do you now know the names of the 5 or 6 next best friends that your son or your daughter associates with? And then finally I'd go the next step beyond that and say, do you know the kind of relationship that those children have with their parents? Because that is a very telling influence. And so I would encourage mums and dads to take that step of finding out who it is that their children associate with. And I, look, as a parent, I have one of my children that is at university level, and when he came home at the break, you know, it was out with the book and, well, who are your mates? Who do you hang around with? And tell me about this guy. You know, what is he like? And those sort of things. And I think that that's a very important element of being able to work peer pressure in a positive way for our young people.
So stay involved.
Stay involved,
in their lives,
absolutely.
even though at times it's a little bit tricky. Peter, you're a parent. In terms of keeping in touch with your children, what are some of the things that you did to stay connected to them during those adolescent years when they tend to be being pulled in another direction by their friends?
Well, I think starting with the peers first of all, until you really know what these friends are like. We went to considerable effort and expense to make sure that when there was a sleepover it was at our place and not at somebody else's place. When there was an event on, I would drive them so that I would get to know what these children were like, and then I would feel free eventually to say, yes, I now know that child, I now know that child's family, I've been to their home, I now know this is a good place for them to be. Other than that, I think it's continually being in touch, making time every day to debrief on what's happened during the day.
Keep that relationship strong.
Every detail, and no matter what's going on for you in your life, that you will put that time aside and actually listen, not just pretend to listen.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Peter said, that turn the TV off, have a meal together at the end of each day and talk about how the day went. Have that conversation. Try and get involved with your children's sports. My children happened to get involved in snowboarding and skiing, and I'd never done that, and so I learnt that sort of closer to 45 than I was anything else. And maybe I provided the entertainment on the slopes, but be that as it may, I was still there and engaged and involved with my own children and their friends as well.
Excellent, some great advice from the panel, thank you. But let's bring it back to the school context. What can we do within the school context in terms of this peer group? Can we impact upon it, or is it an immovable force that's just there?
I think that comes again to connections between the adults in the school and the children, so teachers that relate well to students and can have open dialogue. So it goes back to the same thing with parents, it's communication. So that in one respect, but in another respect, providing them opportunities to be leaders. And so creating a culture of leadership and good choices, and it's actually cool to be making those good choices. And I think the way you tackle that as a school can definitely make it a positive thing.
There are no guarantees in schools, are there, in terms of the outcome that a young person will seek. But one would hope that the environment is going to give them greater opportunities to make positive choices. We need to wrap up our time talking about the hidden curriculum, and what I would like to just finish on is get a perspective from each of you in terms of what you think the Christian school can offer in terms of helping to keep young people strong in their commitment to be good citizens and to have strong Christian values. So let's just have a quick comment from each of you. Natalie.
I think in our schools we're quite fortunate to have Christian values as well as, values that are taught in secular schools. But we also have a hope of a future beyond this earth, heaven, and that provides some sort of certainty for students in an uncertain world. Who knows what they'll face in the future?
Very good. Peter.
I don't know how I would go about teaching values in a state school, because I believe that every value we teach always comes back to God and the teachings of Jesus. And I think it is much easier and much more comfortable to be teaching values in a Christian school.
Excellent. Thank you, folks. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Smart from the Start. We've explored the hidden curriculum. We hope you'll join us next time when we look further at the peer influence, looking at Generation X and Generation Y. Join us then.